Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here today. My name is Jeff Collins. I run ad sales at Fox Corporation, and today we're incredibly fortunate to have some amazing brand marketers with us to talk about really this convergence between what's happening now with pharmaceutical advertising and CTV. And it's really well timed because there's a lot going on in both spaces right now. On the CTV side, there's just been an explosion in new inventory, new supply into the marketplace, and new scale that really gives a lot more capabilities to pharmaceutical advertisers. And on the pharma side, of course, there's all new capabilities from everything from creative execution, dynamic creative, targeting capabilities that are just far superior to what they've been in the past. But then also there's some challenges potentially on the horizon with regulation. So we're going to cover it all today. And again, I'm thrilled to have Alice and Kevin and Erin on stage with us to talk about that. Starting off just super broad, we figured we would start with just CTV is obviously evolving, but it's been around for a while, and all three of you have worked it into your media plans in pretty sophisticated ways. So if you could talk just a little bit about how CTV has evolved your media plans and how much of a component it is of your media plans right now.
Sure. I'll take a stab first. You guys go ahead. I hope from a consumer standpoint, not much has changed, right? They are viewing video. Wherever they are, we are reaching them. Maybe hopefully with slightly more relevant messaging at more relevant times, but from the outside looking in, my hope is that they're not seeing a ton of difference, right? From an internal perspective, I think it's changed quite a bit, right? The conversation that we're having around video in general has become more sophisticated, more of an agile conversation, right? There's more opportunities to change what you're talking about when and where it fits into your plan. And there's a lot more data, and that represents opportunity, right? But also challenges in terms of making sure you have the right skill sets and the right capabilities to deal with that data from a learning and execution standpoint. So externally, I hope it looks like we're still reaching our consumers in the best way possible. Internally, it's an evolving maturity that we have to get to when it comes to video now.
For us, for a CTV perspective, we're a little bit of a contrast. So we have some brands that are just sort of dabbling in the CTV space and starting to increase more, whereas we have another brand that's 100% CTV now that has moved away from the linear TV space. So I think as we move forward, CTV is going to become more and more important. In 2024, broadcast and cable made up over 50% of the share, whereas CTV was about 38% of the share, and that's just going to keep going up. So we have no choice but to move in that direction.
And for us, CTV is a huge component. I would say we are pushing more and more into CTV. We know our audience, we know where they're at, and we want to be there at that right moment, right? We want to make sure, again, we want it to be seamless, like they don't know, but I want to make sure that our audience actually feels like that's relevant to them. And I think CTV offers that to us. We're seeing the engagement, we're seeing great ROI, all of the great things that we are expecting from our CTV. I couldn't be more proud. It's an exciting time for us. We're not doing the 100 million linear like we talked about earlier this morning. Yes, it's a part of that. We do a lot more sponsorships. We're very keen on what types of linear we want to buy, but we like to push more into the CTV to make sure our audience is well-deserved.
Erin, you had a really interesting point backstage, and you mentioned that there were certain brands that you've had that have never been able to advertise in video before because they serve such niche audiences, and now they are able to have sight, sound, and motion in front of those audiences. So that obviously transforms how you go to market for certain brands and certain smaller brands.
Yep. No, it has opened up opportunities for sure for certain brands that weren't just a right fit for video in the past, right? And I think, for CTV, it does serve that full spectrum. We have brands where the audience is a tremendous size in terms of those that we can reach and have an impact from a patient standpoint. And we have brands that are very small. We're talking 1,000, 2,000 patients, right? Where in the past, video just wasn't a way to effectively and efficiently get to them. And that has changed. And I will say across all of our businesses now that are targeting patients, From a communication standpoint, CTV is part of our video mix, and we try to look at it as one holistic entity, you know, more and more as we go into each year of planning, for sure.
I would say even a cost perspective, right, that allows us to be able to do that. So now it's a lot more efficient to reach those audiences that I probably just tacking on to what you just said, but it's literally a way for us to be able to now target through a video platform that we just couldn't, and maybe smaller brands didn't have the, you know, the budget to be able to do. So, which is awesome.
You raise an interesting point about cost, and obviously there's an expense to data, and especially when you're trying to reach a very, very small and granular audience, that's a lot of other people may be trying to reach as well. So can you talk a little bit about balancing the costs of data and targeting versus the efficacy of it, and how you sort of balance that for different brands?
So
Allison, if you want.
yeah, I'll take that. So we measure very specifically at the audience level. So at the moment, we're not able to measure like individual level. We're getting there, but we are able to see the performance, how particular lists are performing, and what we find is sometimes they're too expensive. So some of them work and some of them don't work. So we balance out some of those higher cost targets with some of the more efficient buys. So we take a look kind of like in a cross grid to make sure that even though it costs more, that the responsiveness is there, right? So it becomes that trade-off of finding your niche audience while still doing it in a cost-efficient way and really still getting your reach, because sometimes we can get over-targeted and not reach the volume that we're expecting to reach as well.
Yeah.
And how has the data improved over time? And are there sort of new ways or new methodologies that you're using now, or has the data become more effective over the last several years? Has that changed at all?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it has definitely matured, right? Both in size and quality. I think in the space that we have to operate in, right, we have to balance that with the ongoing, at times, limitations to what data we can use, when, and how, right? So while I think it's definitely become more sophisticated and there's more we can do, more potential, we're also consistently balancing that with what is allowable, what's responsible, and how do we continue to treat our patients and their data with the respect that it deserves, obviously.
Yeah. Maybe to go about a little bit more on that, you know, at Gilead, whether you know or not, we're leaders in the HIV space and also prevention in HIV, something we're very proud of and trying to eradicate that. And with all of that news, like reaching those audiences are particularly challenging at times, right? Because it's a protected class. You've got people that are looking at PrEP. They don't have an indication, right? There's no claims data on this type of patient and potential patient. And so reaching those audiences are just key. We talk about it all the time, and we want to make sure that we're following it within that customer journey of what we know, but also not be creepy with it. And right, that's where it comes with the responsibility, right? I mean, I would like to think of someone that just was diagnosed with HIV. Think about that for a moment, and maybe the impact that you may have. And then the next thing you do is you pull up your phone and you have an HIV ad saying, hey, here's a drug for you. That's creepy, right? And I think that's something that we take very responsible at our company, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. We want to be there at the right moment at the right time, but it all comes with a human aspect of that. And that's something that we pride ourselves in. We want to make sure that we are there for the patient to make sure that they feel that the information, when they need it, is there for them. And so there's no real, answer to that question, right? Everyone's different, but I think that's just something that we take at a mindful approach of making sure that we keep the human aspect as well with that.
And is that pretty much self-regulated? Like each one of your businesses, you have to make unique decisions based on whatever the state is or whatever the targeting is or the condition?
It's both for us, right? So you have the state, it's a protected class from a federal perspective, like at least on that end. But then we have our self-regulatory, like we want to make sure, here's our guide rails of what we think is creepy or allowable or not, right? And so we blend all of that together when we look at an advertising perspective, so.
Yeah, I was just going to take a different stance on the data question, in that the data has always kind of been there for CTV. We've had robust data for a while. I think what's improved more is our ways in which to measure it. So we have a lot more ability now to use machine learning algorithms, for example, to do identity-less attribution, which allows us to get down really granular and be able to measure those audience level. And then now with the invention of the clean rooms and moving into the HIPAA compliance, expert determination to be able to connect the users, we get to measure that data now in a way we weren't able to before.
That's great. And then does that measurement also include areas for optimization, particularly in CTV, as the campaign's ongoing?
Absolutely. So it's more than just being able to compare partners, but that's probably where we start, is being able to look at the different CTV partners, but then looking down within those specific audience lists. So we work with multiple different partners, health partners, in order to create those lists, and then that's the optimization that I was talking about earlier, being able to understand which lists are most efficient across those different platforms.
I think that capability too, that opportunity with CTV that we haven't traditionally had with linear has forced us to have the conversations around agility, flexibility, targetability in linear as well, right? So I think it's also helping to move the entirety of the video ecosystem forward from that perspective, right? And to kind of drive some acceleration in those conversations that happen between agencies, the advertisers, and the marketplace too.
And how do you balance linear with CTV, and how do you use the two sort of mediums together?
I mean, each year, right, as we go into planning, we try to look at it collectively, right, across all the different video elements that we can invest in. Obviously, that tends to be accelerated by the upfront timeline, right, which feels a bit clunky at the beginning, but we kind of fall into it as we go. we all do it. We all kind of march our way through it. But then once we get into specific target audiences, specific brand objectives, the role of CTV versus other video elements starts to become clearer based on that unique audience, their needs, what's relevant, their consumption habits, and how all of the touch points in which we can reach them will work together for that specific business.
We're very ROI driven, so we use a lot of modeling to understand how each of the different channels drive the outcome that we want. And so as of right now, CTV wins in that battle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. At Fox, we've engaged in the two polar opposite ends of the media spectrum, where we only really play in like the very, very high reach live linear content, and then the very granular targeting. So it's live sports, live news, and then Tubi, which is cord cutters and cord nevers, so just very granular targeted audience, and we don't really go anywhere in the middle. And we're finding a lot of advertisers are sort of gravitating towards that. It's like, I want to get my big scaled audiences in certain places that still exist in linear, where they still exist in linear, but then I need to round that out. I need to be able to find audiences that aren't in linear anymore, and there's 50 million people that have cut the cord. So how do I reach those folks, and then how do I do so in a targeted way? You touched upon measurement. I'm just curious a little bit more, and Kevin or Aaron, I don't know if you want to add into this as well. Just what are some of the different measurement ways that you're measuring campaigns now, if you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, lots, in the last, 5 or so years, a lot more conversation around truly leading metrics when it comes to video, right? Versus before it was very much, and we still look at ROI, obviously, and script lift when we can get to it, but I think other video options now have given us the opportunity to actually look at leading metrics like engagement or other items and make choices based on that quickly, whereas we weren't doing that before. So I think the data set has changed. It's added complexity, right? Because now we have other data points from a leading perspective that we need to connect to those lagging, most important metrics, right? So that takes our data and analytics partners, to work hard with us. But it has enabled just more of an agile mindset when it comes to video, which has been powerful.
Yeah, I would, on top of that, I guess, from a measurement perspective, you had the linear piece where GRPs, you were looking at it from that perspective, and now you look at CTV, you're looking at impressions, so trying to make sense of all of that is, some of the challenges that we continuously have, but I think as we look at it is, we have a lot more metrics within their CTV, and we can act upon those at a quicker response. And so that's what drives us a little bit in making sure that we are, funding that appropriately when it comes to our balance between linear and CTV as well. So.
Yeah. And are you finding enough scale in CTV at this point? I know there's so much new supply that's coming to market with Amazon Prime and all of these other areas. Like, is the scale there?
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's huge. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of it, right? So, I mean, I'd love to talk about it forever, but I think CTV is, people are cutting cords, they're doing those kinds of things. I think that's where we're leaning in the hardest, the audiences that we're trying to attract. I think we're just seeing a large scale, huge ROIs that we haven't seen before, so.
Yeah, and just to follow back on the measurement piece again, everybody can tell I'm the numbers person on the stage. But yeah, so we do calibrate everything up to ROI. That's our single source of truth, but we've pivoted into leading indicators as well. The way in which we consume TV has changed so dramatically. The research shows that if you're going to engage with a TV ad, you do so within 90 seconds, which is like insane. And we watch TV with a device in our hand, right? We've got our cell phone, we've got our iPad, we've got our laptop. And so we use what I refer to an identity-less attribution solution that focuses on engagement with the site. So by using metrics like that, we're able to measure more in real time and be able to get those results back a lot quicker than waiting for those ROIs. It's directional because it's not tied directly to a conversion, but we're able to tell how partners and campaigns are doing in much quicker time frame.
As a media provider, I'm curious to hear your take on audience versus context, because I'm hearing so much about audience and the targeting and everything else, but how important is the context that you're getting? And I know in the CTV space, sometimes there's not always the level of transparency you might want from some of the CTV providers. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I feel like contextual targeting, right? That was very important many years ago, right? And then we kind of got away from it, and rightly so, with the data sets that were growing to very much audience-driven planning, buying, optimization, and understanding performance. My feeling and my gut now is that we're getting hopefully to a happy medium of both of those elements being critically important to how you appear to a consumer. I think in healthcare and pharma, we have to be especially cognizant of and take more of, maybe even more so of a hands-on approach to managing that context in which we appear. Even if you are audience-based targeting, you need to have a very specific focused approach to your guardrails around contextual placement, because we have to be extra sensitive to that, obviously. But I think from a strategy standpoint, I'm feeling that both targeting elements are starting to become equally important again.
Talking about targeting and the ability to target, obviously there's new capabilities, especially now with AI, around dynamic creative, right? And being able to serve that message. Obviously, there's a lot more regulation within the pharmaceutical industry and what you can and can't do. I'm just curious how you manage the dynamic nature of creative that you can now have with some of the larger regulations that you have to abide by, and also the delicate nature of the message that you're delivering to a consumer too. So I don't know, Kevin, do you want to lead us off with that?
Yeah, we've been dabbling in DCO, so dynamic creative optimization. We find that that's an added layer to our personalization. So it's not directly about CTV, but just from an other channel approach. Dynamic creative optimization is where we love to test different modes, right? As you can imagine, it could be a different picture, it could be somebody of a different ethnicity, could be somebody. In our case, we have some that have like a pride flag, others don't have a pride flag. It's how is our audience being more engaging when it comes to our creative? I think that's where we love to see this, because we see the personalization come through, where certain ads are getting no clicks or no impressions, people aren't viewing it, not engaging with it, and others we're seeing a huge uptake, right? And so we know that personalization is something that our audience wants. I think we all do. I think, you don't want to see an ad that's not relevant to you. And I think Chris even alluded that today, 55% of the ads are not relevant to the potential patients, right? And so to drive on that and to experiment is something that we're keen on doing to try to drive a little bit more engagement across the board. So maybe to connect it back to CTV is when you see that ad, then what's the next ad you're going to see? And hopefully a DCO can be a part of that, right? Let's build that approach. I hate omni-channel, but using that word, but like the omni-channel is saying, hey, CTV, now you've gone onto your mobile phone, everything that's coming through. Let's have that personalization come through when you actually get on and experience that ad. So.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, too, to see the tools and the technology evolve from a personalization standpoint, right? I think AI tools, technology have been built into how we build and even more so buy media plans for a while, right? In terms of the algorithms and the optimization capabilities that have been established. And obviously those are accelerating and getting more sophisticated too. But I think recently we've seen especially what AI may represent from a creative standpoint in terms of agility too. And to me, I think obviously we live in a unique universe, right? We're going to have to take our regulatory and other internal partners along with us on that ride. But that to me is now the next level in terms of content that feels relevant for our audiences that we know we are reaching with scale, but specifically at scale, and with speed, right? And we just have to do it in the right way, obviously.
But Kevin, what you're seeing is more sort of subtle changes.
Yeah, right now, subtle. I mean, it's going back to Aaron. Like, you know, the regulatory piece is probably the bottleneck, I would say. It's a great bottleneck, but it's one that we have to overcome, right? And there's reasons that we have that. But I think as we learn to use AI and the tools that we have to be able to do that and smarter, is where we can, you know, tap into that personalization even further.
That's great. Yeah. There's obviously with CTV, it's not just about dating data capabilities. It's also about new sorts of ad products that are available now. Some are relevant for your category, some aren't relevant for your category. I'm curious if there's any areas of experimentation that you have all done with ad products or new ad formats that are within CTV that maybe weren't available within linear that are working.
Interactive. So moving into the interactive space and trying to, because like I said, we are interactive with TV now, way more than we used to be. So testing out those interactive formats, whether it be a QR code or some other way that is a more specific call or drive to action that gives them a way to connect or respond to the ad in a quicker way, which we weren't able to do with linear before.
That's great.
I'd say for us, taking advantage of live or bigger moments through connected TV, I think is something that we have started to investigate and you know, execute on more. I think that's by nature of the inventory being more available, right? But that is something that we have been pursuing more of.
Sports and yeah. Do you find there's a difference in performance between live moments and sort of on-demand moments, or is it just the audience is different, or the messaging could be different?
I think yes, the messaging can be different. I think that also comes down to what do you do around those moments, right? So if there is a live moment that represents an opportunity to have other elements of activation, whether it's digitally or in-person activation, I think that's where kind of the magic happens, right? That separates maybe a live moment or a big tentpole moment from just maybe more, which is important still, but run of schedule kind of sports and more premium content.
And do you differentiate between on-demand content and sort of fast channels, which are kind of always on all the time? Is there a differentiation there, or not particularly? No?
Oh, you guys.
No. Yes and no. I don't know. Maybe I'm not really sure. But sometimes we look at that from like a fast channel. Like, we'll have different approaches to that, to like reaching our audiences. But I think, you know, we buy that, you know, for different reasons, right? And so I think that's kind of, it depends on what our therapeutic area is on some of that to get that engagement from them. But I don't maybe have a direct answer.
So we'll pivot a little bit from some of the opportunities and some of the potential challenges on the horizon. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about potential increases in regulation in the industry at large. It sounds like CTV could actually be an opportunity to help with some of those increased regulations. But I'm just curious, what's going on in your organizations now as you're sort of scenario planning for the future and the sort of potential what-ifs that are out there? Alice, I don't know if you want to lead us off.
So I don't know if it's quite as relevant, but one of the things that we're addressing right now is the upfronts and how much we are actually spending in the upfronts as well. So we will probably be pulling back a little bit from how much we've been spending in the upfronts to give us that more flexibility. So as budgets change, but also being able to optimize a little bit better. When we commit so much to the upfronts, we're not able to do that. And so I think that's one of the things in this changing environment that we'll probably be shifting a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of the requests that we're getting in at Fox Corp is just, can we have sort of what ifs put into some of our contracts for the upfront? Right. And obviously if there's a dramatic change in regulation, obviously we're certainly willing to do that. I think you'll probably get that across the board. From most media vendors, it was similar to what happened during COVID, where
Right.
you have to let people out for extraordinary circumstances. So I trust that will happen, and hopefully that sort of reassurance allows people to have the confidence to spend and invest. Kevin, I don't know about yourself, what's happening?
So, I mean, we look at it, I think the organization, the federal government, we had some challenges with this, right? As PrEP, we're noticing that the government's removed things for PrEP, prevention of HIV on the CDC. So that's now been removed from government sites. We have an upcoming launch. It's a news for PrEP as well, for long-acting PrEP, an injection coming in the near future. That's just been hit hard by the government agencies of, it could be insurance, it could be benefits from that, and just also information to the general public. We're concerned by that. I think there's a lot of things within the organization, from a government perspective, as we look to, what may be happening with DTC, what can we do from a pharma perspective. I hate to use, this is, 21 days of an organization in the federal government, and there's been 62 different, executive orders come through. We find that's a little disturbing, right? Because we don't know what's next. But it's not fear-mongering. I think it's just something we have to understand and say, okay, we have to scenario plan and all of that. I trust that our agency partners are doing that. They're working well with us. Every day is a little bit different. We find out more information, but I think we just have to be nimble, and I think we can do that. I feel very confident. We will continue to reach for our patients and strive for that. They deserve it, and I think it's just something that we will do everything that we can to be there for them.
Yeah, I think it's required another level of internal connectivity too on our side, right? So someone working in media and marketing haven't had a ton of connection points historically with our team that sits in Washington, D.C., right? Yeah. That has changed. And there's, regular conversation around just even scenario planning verbally, right? Given what they're seeing on the Hill and potential changes or lack thereof that may be coming, the timing of those. So the level of connectivity internally and what that looks like has definitely shifted over the last few months. And, in my mind, yes, it represents a lot of challenges, right? And a lot of work that may never see the light of day. I think there's also an opportunity here to continue to push maybe a little bit faster up that hill around what do our patients really want to hear and see from us and when, right? And what do all the different levers that we have to pull within video, what do they look like within that world today and the world tomorrow, right? And I think this moment of unknown, I'm hoping kind of moves that conversation forward, right? And we see benefit at the end of the day, not just, scenario plans that don't ever see the light of day, which, we all know that will happen. But yeah, I do see an opportunity in this moment and how we're talking about patients and what they see from all marketing standpoint, but in this case, video specifically.
So sorry, go ahead, Alice.
No, it reminded me of a stat that I think it was Chris that put up earlier, that 92% of HCPs thought it was valuable. Was that correct? That patient marketing was valuable,
right?
In that bringing things. I think that's an interesting take on it. I'd never seen a number like that, and I was really surprised by that.
That's great. You just brought up HCPs. How do you actually manage the marketing to healthcare professionals with your D2C efforts and balance the two out together? Kevin, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, we definitely blend. I mean, I think if anything, we look at HCPs as patients as well, right? They are humans. They are interacting with our ads, and that is something that we see a lot of connectivity, right, within our plans. That part's exciting to me, right? So, you know, you can reach the HCPs, they're seeing that, there's connectivity, and we're measuring that, and we're seeing some great success with those plans. So we like to, you know, think of that together instead of separate.
Yeah, we're just starting to dabble a little bit in using CTV specifically to target HCPs, but I think the potential, like you said, being able to find physicians when they're wearing their jeans, if you will, but being able to find them in their personal moments, I think is an untapped potential, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there that we're starting to explore.
Yeah. I think just to build on that, I think the next level opportunity that I don't feel like we at Amgen have cracked yet is not just how do you reach HCPs in more of that lean back moment, but how do you use media marketing to connect the experience of the patient and the experience of the HCP better, right? And make that that transition from them being on their own in their silos to having a conversation easier, right? That involves where we're saying it, but also what we're saying to help fuel that right level of engagement between the two. That, to me, I feel like is still a really untapped opportunity that I see across our organization.
Okay, great. It wouldn't be a panel unless we talked about AI. So love to talk a little bit about AI, how it's transforming your businesses, how it's transforming everything from targeting to creative to everything else that you're doing within the marketing world. So whoever wants to lead away.
I'll tap into what I already, like the DCO piece, right? That's where we're kind of looking at it, right? So I think from an AI perspective is just looking at the effectiveness of creative and how can we be better at that. How can we use tools to predict as well as like make decisions a lot quicker, right? And I think that's where I'm excited about it. I think it's all about the personalization when it comes to AI, right, for us, at least for me.
We're all in on the AI from the machine learning perspective for a long time now, but just starting to find new ways to, especially from the creative standpoint of finding ways to use like Gen AI, et cetera, to help us optimize content.
Yeah, creative. Yeah, the creative is the opportunity, I think. Yeah,
I would have thought we would have had more around data and targeting and measurement than on the creative side. That's interesting.
Not from the Gen AI piece.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think we have a couple minutes left. We can open it up to any questions from the audience.
Is this thing on? Oh, cool.
There you go.
Sounds like everyone's force majeure clauses are getting another paragraph. But seriously, folks, there's a word that I heard for years that didn't come up in this conversation that was very interesting to me, which was namely, last year, for example, I couldn't get 5 minutes into a TV conversation without someone asking about the incrementality of CTV audiences on top of their linear plans. Have you all solved that, or is the growth of the audience on the CTV side such that we can dispense with that question? Where's the state of incrementality in your minds today?
For us, it's not an incrementality above, it's a comparison point. And as I mentioned earlier, it's winning. So for us, we're seeing that CTV is a bit more efficient. It tends to have lower CPMs, and the targeting overall has, because it's more specific, and we're dealing with those lists, we're seeing a higher engagement, higher response, which in turns in higher overall ROI. I don't know if that's quite what you were looking for, but.
Yeah.
I echo that as well.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I echo that as well. Like we're higher engagement. It's a more cost-effective approach to reaching our audiences, and we're seeing that engagement, through the roof, right? So when we report through, NTA, we're seeing higher ROIs, and that's driving a lot of our business.
Yeah, I think from our side, agree with everything said here, and we're actually trying to pull some of that audience-based targeting through to our linear buys as well, so that it's not a this and then that. It's how does this all work together, right? And that's a longer term journey, right? But we're trying to drive more of that.
So thank you, panel. I appreciate the content today. So audience precision is clearly critical to driving efficiency and reach, but in an omni-channel world, right? How do we go about measuring the optimal reach, frequency, and conversion across multiple channels? Are you there yet? Are there solutions you're working on to help reduce oversaturation? And many of us have seen that same commercial over and over again when we're watching TV, and kind of gets a little numbing. So is there a way that you're trying to solve that riddle, or has it already been solved?
Yeah, we are. We are building a clean room, so we are really excited to be able to start to stitch together that journey. It's never going to be 100%. We're talking about percentages of 20%, probably at best, when you start to match things together. But being able to start to look at that patient journey and then that lead time, especially if we have infusion drugs, that long lead time for them actually to go on to infusion, for example. So that is part of that journey of understanding that reach and frequency. Frequency is going to be key for a lot of these channels as well, especially in a smaller market when you have less patients and some of the rare diseases. But yeah, for us, we're looking forward to being able to measure that when you can actually look at the journey. Until now, we haven't been able to do that. So most things have been more circumstantial, if you will. So stay tuned.
No, this is great. It's rare I get to pick people's brains on stage for 5 minutes. So it's interesting to hear about efficiency on CTV, because I had previously heard the one great advantage of linear was scale, and you can make it up on the margin of impressions you're being served. Have you found that CTV inventory has come down in price, or you've just found better ways of maximizing the efficiency of CTV buys as compared to linear, as we were just talking about upfronts, where someone could say, I can make it up to you wholesale as long as we're going for a GRP or whatever number?
I can answer that. And I looked at some data points even right before. So let me say it this way. I think the ROI has trickled down, but not like what we've seen for linear, if that makes sense. So as a comparator, I have seen that, is ROI going down on CTV and some of that, from a cost perspective? Some, right? It's becoming a little bit more popular, but it's definitely not what I'm seeing from a linear perspective. So we continue to drive into that aspect. So it may give some insight to that, right? To say, yeah, maybe some of the costing is changing on some of that. It's not always the complete cost effective. Maybe it was a couple years ago or beyond, but it's definitely better than what we're seeing from a linear perspective.
I think for us, we also have to look at it based on that business and the audiences that we're trying to reach, right? So in some cases, a higher CPM may be worth it because of the targetability aspect of it, right? And at the end of the day, that will pay out in some of those lagging metrics. We try really hard, and it's challenging, right? Because you have financial people at the table, and they don't always want to look at it holistically, but we do try really hard to drive the conversation around, yes, there is the pricing aspect, but there's also the effectiveness and the impact, right? And the ability to reach your specific audience that we need to take into account, which should pay out in those lagging metrics at the end of the day.
Hi, my name's Alex. I'm part of the Deep Intent team. Understand a lot of the point of CTV is to reach certain audiences and really be smart with your dollars. But how are you planning against those audiences to figure out where they are, allocating to CTV and then other channels too? Are you using any specific tools for planning?
Have our agency partners. No, I mean, a lot of the traditional sources, right, in terms of syndicated data, but more and more because we've built the library over time, historical performance data comes into play, right, in terms of what has performed well, and as long as you're not drastically changing your audience and that consumption data that's updated isn't showing you anything different, you can still rely on that historical performance data as an indicator. But I think for the most part, it is a combination of those two, right? Specific business analysis plus some of that syndicated data that helps us lean in directionally to specific channels over others.
Future-wise, we're looking at taking, and not relying as much on third party, but looking at first party and then enhancing that, right, for us in a clean room, privacy safe way. So we are looking at that perspective in the near future to reach those audiences and lookalike modeling, et cetera, to help support that from a CTV perspective.